Alrighty, there's the notification. There's the pinned comment. And push notification. Alright. Cool. Alright, what we're gonna do today is some Slayer. Reason for that, I want to train up some more mage and defense, but other methods will be boring as shit for you guys to watch. So I might as well do Slayer at the same time. Got to level up Slayer anyway. So let's have a look at what our first task is. Cave slums. Please tell me there's a better spot than the dungeon, than Lumbridge. Flashing attacks, lesser. God damn it. They're so spread out there. I swear there was another spot. But I don't know where, so I guess we're going there. Oh, I need a light source. Oh, and the spiny helm. Helmet. Put that in there. Light source. I have a lantern somewhere. Cool. Let's go. Cool, and it's not exposed, so I should be able to go anywhere. And the dog farted. Love it. Alrighty. So I guess recap. I have another video coming out. Oh yeah, yesterday I had an appointment, so I didn't stream. Tomorrow, so what I did is not last night, but the night before, me and the boys did some dungeoneering, and I recorded that, so that'll go on YouTube to fill in that day. And then we did a bunch of dungeoneering again last night. That was a lot of fun. I've been really enjoying the group dungeoneering. I keep going looking for the hole, but they've changed it. Yeah, so mostly did that. I did a bit of rune span because I wanted to craft my own runes when I'm in there rather than hold people up. I'm focusing on magic. Ben's focusing on... yeah, get fucked, buddy. Ben is focusing on range. Jack is focusing on melee. And we've also got our other sub-little thingies that we've kind of set up, our like skills that we're focusing on. Let me grab that open. So... obviously, any of us can do anything. It's just, you know, what each of us are individually going to focus on even more. So for me, I'm going to do magic, farming, herb lore, thieving, and rune crafting. So that's why like the rune crafting is just so I can make my own runes. Pretty much the main thing. Ooh, I actually need another page for this. Maybe I swapped to... What page did I set it to? Was it just 4? Yeah, here we go. This is just more single target, so I don't pull everything in the map. Okay, looks like I am possibly going to need food. Actually, no, if I'm on single target, it should be fine. So I should be able to just regen up. Oh, I am poisoned, though. Alright, now kill the big frog. Stop it! Leave me alone! Cure poison. You don't have anything. Okay, that's fair. Yeah, and I'm already doing farming and herb lore, and they're kind of a pain for everyone to get up, so I might as well get it up. Thieving. And then Ben's going to do range, mining, smithing, and fletching. I think he's also going to focus on Slayer, but we're all going to do Slayer still. Might as well. We're going to need it anyway. And then Jack is doing melee, divination, fishing, cooking, and fire making. That's all we've got so far. And then construction, Jack already has, but we're all going to have to do that anyway. Agility, no one wants to do. And I don't know how much agility we'll actually need, but I might do that if need be. Crafting, I think few of us are going to do it because it'll just be easier for me to make my own armor. Like, fletching is fine if Ben does, like, makes my, my weapons, because I can just, you know, bind that. But I don't want to be making it I don't want him to be making me a full armor set every time. Like, I might as well just do that myself, right? Slayer, we're all doing. Hunter, we haven't figured that out yet, but I'm not the one doing it. That's the other one I refuse to do. And lastly, woodcutting, I think, is just going to happen naturally. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. So that's where we're at. Not much more. Let's have a look at the XP and total levels. This is kind of interesting. I can actually look at the... I find it again for the team one. Group Iron Man. 730, 1026, 1166. I know, I'm slacking. But in my defense, I do have the most XP by like 1 million. Because I've been doing my thieving. But yeah, I'm a bit of a slacker in terms of diversification. But the boys have got that. Jack's a quester. He likes his doing his quests for... Actually, I should be picking this up because I can actually use the swamp tar for Herblock. Yeah, Jack likes doing his little optimal getting the XP from quests kind of thing a little bit at a time. Although he's not looking things up, so maybe he's just doing quests to get whatever it unlocks, I guess. Not sure. Yeah, that is where we are at. I need to move this loot window because it is hiding my tasks. There we go. 35 cave slimes, cool. Yeah, gonna do a bit of this today. I've got runes to do mage training arena, but holy fuck, that is boring to do and it'll be boring to watch. We aren't gonna do that. Rune javelin. Oh, level 22s. What? They are thrown weapons in this still. Okay, so in old school they changed it to be ammo. But I guess it's still just thrown weapons in this. Give me the swamp tar. In old school news, I am 33k off of 96. I actually haven't been logging into it that much. Or at least I've been forgetting to log into it. So that's a good sign for RuneScape 3. It means I'm enjoying it. But I will get 99. And then 99 fishing. And then possibly we'll see about getting sailing if I still want to be playing this. But you can AFK the sailing as well. Unfortunately, I think that's it for what I can AFK on there, though. I mean, I could do smithing bars, but that's just horrible. We never know. We never know. I probably have some gold ore left, probably a shit ton, actually. Grab that. Might as well grab the runes. Yeah, so my goals at the moment are magic, defense, herbal, farming, and crafting. Crafting, I definitely want to get up a lot. What the fuck is this? Oh, it's a clue scroll. That's my first clue scroll. Crafting I definitely want to get up just so I can make, like, tier 50 armor, I guess. Oops, that is not what I meant to be clicking on. I'm not sure why I bothered closing the loot tab, but it is what it is. Alright, we're gonna health back after this. Give me the swamp tower. Give me the swamp tower. At least I'm hoping I can still use the swamp tower to make... Yeah, because I saw it in the herblore tab, like Harrowlander tar and stuff like that. Just an easy way to not need secondary ingredients while getting at least some XP. Unfortunately, I tried out the cockatrice, and I was getting as many limpworts, even though when I went there for limpworts, I was getting none, and I was only getting cockatrice eggs. Now that I went back, I was getting more limpworts than cockatrice eggs. So I'm a little salty about that. But it is what it is. We can't change it. It's all just luck in this game. And complaining. Lots and lots of complaining. We must complain. We love complaining. Complaining is what we do. But yeah. Dungeoneering has been some of the most fun that I've had on Group Iron Man, which is saying a lot because I love Group Iron Man in general. I'm talking both on old school and this. Dungeoneering's been sick. Absolutely sick. Yeah, we might do more of that tonight. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. There's days like today that I want to have the chat open. Not because I want, like, because there's no hints or anything that I really want. But it's like, I've done Slayer. Like, there's nothing really interesting about Slayer other than it's more interesting than me just grinding at, like, Mage Training Arena or something. There's not really much for me to commentate on. Unfortunately, I just know that if I have chat open, something will be spoiled. Completely unrelated to Slayer, even. Something will be spoiled. And, like, the worst case scenario would be something that I'm completely stuck on, like, the Guild of Our Own quest. And, like, finding that stupid guild registry. I have no idea where it is. But someone will probably spoil that. Which I don't want. As frustrating as it is fun at the same time. Yeah. Also, I mean, tomorrow I'm gonna have the chat open, but I probably won't be playing RuneScape, so... And I won't be in the RuneScape 3 category, so I won't get people jumping in, trying to give unsolicited advice. Even if, like, the thing is, like, that's the other thing that's so, like, frustrating about it, is you can't even be mad at them for, like, giving the advice, because it's like, they're genuinely just trying to help, they're trying to be good people. It's just unfortunate that it's not in alignment with what I actually want to do. But they're not doing anything bad. And even though I've got a pinned comment and I've got a alert going, an announcement going every 15 minutes, people still aren't going to see that. A lot of people don't read pinned comments. A lot of people don't. You know, they might not be there right when the alert is happening. So it's like, can't really blame them. It is what it is. It's just an unfortunate factor. And I'm still having fun. I mean, and later on, maybe if I start feeling like I'm not really learning much, maybe I will just open up chat, but I won't, I'll just do the quests and stuff completely solo. Not sure. Because, like, to me, this isn't really, like, it's not even necessarily about the challenge of doing everything guideless. that adds to the fun, but it's not about that. It's about experiencing the game, right? Like, that's the primary thing. I want to have the most fun I can, and like, the most fun I can have is through like discovery and learning for the first time, right? You know, I said in a previous video where it's like, you can't experience RuneScape again like you did when you were a kid. You know, you can't experience games like that ever again because you've already played it. You already know too much about it. So you're already coming in through the lens of someone who has experience in it. Whereas doing RuneScape 3, there is a lot that I will know, but there's a lot that I don't. And it's that discovery stuff that makes it kind of, that adds to the extra fun. But at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is the fun. It's the same reason I'm not like, you know, super strict on like my group mates if they want to, you know, look something up because they're stuck or whatever. So far, Jack hasn't. Ben has, but that's fine. He's not going to tell me anything. But it's like, because at the end of the day, it's like, it's literally about, I don't want to take away their fun either. Because that's the ultimate goal. The fun. The fun. So, yeah, we'll see how we go. Things might change later on. I actually didn't get to stream last weekend and talk to people as well, so that'll be interesting this weekend. Tomorrow, have a chat to my viewers in quite a bit. Tomorrow's the day. Four left. Cool. These are not a great task. I still don't know what the salvage does. I'm gonna figure that out. I probably should be picking it up considering I'm not filling up my inventory much here. One thing that I found really cool is, so divination was in dungeoneering, so I guess they updated it at some point. But yeah, we realized that we can stack. It's like Jack has divination levels and I have herb lore levels. We managed to boost using both of them to reach a point where we could get through doors that were way higher level than us. So that was a lot of fun because it required teamwork, like from both of us in two different skills, to overcome a third skill that we had nothing. Well, it wasn't even, no, what was it? It was, so I had to do the farming for the herbs. Then I had to turn the herbs into a potion. Also, I'm going back to Edgeville. I had to turn the herbs into, I think I did it to 2 potions, but we only needed 1 of them. I think he needed a divination potion, so he could get 1 higher level in divination, so that he could unlock a thing that lets you open doors that were 10 or 15 levels higher or something like that, in a completely separate skill. So like that whole combination, that's like the ultimate fun when it comes to like dungeoneering and as a group. Like that was cool as. Well, Ben was being useless. No, I don't know what Ben was doing. He was probably running around the map or something. What was I doing? Going into the bank. Hopefully I'd like to get rid of my poison. Oh, it doesn't get rid of the poison. It just heals you. Interesting. Get task. I need another assignment. Wolves. Oh, that's perfect. Oh, those moss giants would have been nice though. Wolves. Awesome. So I want the wolf bones because I want that for... Actually, do I even want the wolf bones now? I was going to say I want it for... I can go in there. I guess that goes in there. Maybe we should try and do this clue scroll. I was going to say that the wolf bones for summoning, but outside the mill in Tavali, okay. Oh my god, I keep on interrupting myself. The wolf bones for summoning, but I can just do chickens at this point, which use the same charms, more XP, and even easier to get. It'd be more XP per charm, I believe. Barrel. Are you the one? First try. Easy. Talk to one of the squires on the White Knight's castle. I actually was just at the White Knight's castle. I tested out the chest today. That is lumberage. I still don't like this menu. Oh, I also did my hotkeys and stuff a bit more. And set up some bars. There's more my utility teleport bar. Yeah, I'm still not a fan of the combat. I have a bad feeling that I'm never going to be a fan of this combat, just because it's not even just a old school versus EOC kind of thing. It's also because I think like people who like old school combat but like don't play it much might. Oh, sorry, they're not like deep in combat. They might enjoy it a bit, but like for me, I'm like, you know, a tick manipulating fucking Andy that loves like one tick flicking and all the complicated shit with ticks and stuff, which not that I can see in this. What was it? Talk to one of the squires. Is that just a generic squire or this guy? I'm guessing it's a generic squire then. No. All right, there it is. That's the thing just north of, yeah, right? I've seen this. I'm pretty sure I've seen this clue before in whatchamacallit, unless they've changed its location. Because wasn't that here? It might have changed. Yeah, because there's the bend in the fence. That should just be here. This is an old clue. Oh, unless it's like the thing that's way further down, actually. Oh my god. I interrupted myself again and I've already forgotten what I was saying. Cool. Awesome. Alright, so it's probably this spot over here. I think this has moved a little. Okay. In between these two. Wait. Dig. Oh, thank god. Draw box, open! Oh. Jump for joy at beehives. Equip iron boots, an unholy symbol, and a steel hatchet. Oh no. Oh no. Steel hatchet, unholy symbol. Jack, you had an unholy symbol, right? And do either of you have iron boots? Alright. Unholy symbol, is that 20? Is there a silver section? Jewelry. Unholy symbol, 17. Okay, so I can also just... No, I don't have a... Huh. Whoops. Sorry. My bad, God. I apologize. Please forgive me. Also, iron boots. Iron boots. What drops iron boots? Is that rock slugs? Maybe? Yeah, let's have a look. Items. Okay, that's just what you get. So, monsters. Who drops the iron boots? Who drops the bronze boots? I feel like it might be rock slugs. Or cockatrice. I don't remember. Oh well. I'm gonna put this back for now. Put that away. What do we get? Wolves. Cool. Heavily. Did not find a spot with shit tons of... Oh, no. I'm going to, I've done the quest. That should let me mold for it. Oh, okay. Alright. I want to go... Varrock. Watch this. This is the brains of someone who has played way too much of this game. We go to Varrock. We go to this tree. We teleport to the Gnome Stronghold. Sorry, not Gnome Stronghold, the Tree Gnome Village. And then we teleport to the Hazard Battlefield. And I believe that's what it's called. Or it might just be called the Battlefield. Teleport. Battlefield of Khazad. Close enough. Close enough. Give me my nerd points. And then we just run over here. And this should be way more dense than over at Tavily. From what I saw when I ran past it. Level 11s. Since they're so low level, we can swap this back to 3 so we can AoE. Look at this. Look at this. It's beautiful. Boom. Oh, even better. We can go like this. Hang on. Loot custom, because I have it set to prayer items. EZ. The only question is, what's the quickest way to bank? Would it just be teleporting back to Varrock and doing the same thing, but... Oh wait, no, I can just run up. Oh wait, no, I can't use that bank yet. I don't have runes on. Oh, I do have runes on me. I could use the bank, maybe. I don't think I have to do a mini quest or anything to unlock that bank. It's not really worth it. Give me the loot. Give me the loot. Oh, cool. It grabs it anyway, even though, like, so it's grabbing the charm, even though I've already... Oh, well, I'm slaughtering these. What the hell? They're all dead. Respawn, please. Mayday, mayday. I've got a problem. Alright. We can turn this problem into an opportunity. Alright, while these respawn... I could just world hop, actually. World hop. I was actually going to teleport to Tavily, bank, and kill some there. But this will be quicker. Boom! I do wonder if maybe just Artie Bank is worth the run instead. No, we're gonna try the Artie Bank. Oh, no, fuck it. We're going to Orania. We're testing it. I just have to go there. I should be able to go down. And then I can trade some runes to bank. And then I can just come back up. That's how it should be theoretically. Climb down. I think I've already talked to him. Alright, you, bank. What have I got? Most of Earth. Dump these, go back up. Cool. The other thing is this means that we can chuck our prayers on. So we can do a little more magic damage. Not much more because we're, trash. That's the magic one. Magic string. Luminite rock. I was about to say, those aren't, I don't remember gold rocks being there, but luminite. And that on, kill the wolf. Kill the wolf, kill the wolf. Alright, you guys don't respawn quick enough, so I'm killing you as well. Leave no wolf behind. Maybe we do some summoning later. We'll see. I think I actually need one of these. Oh, wait, no, that might loot all of them, right? Please don't loot all of them. Okay, cool. I think I need one wolf meat for a quest later. I think you need wolf meat, rabbit meat. No, wolf meat, bear meat. Knowing this, it's probably some, like, special wolf meat or a special thing just to fuck with you. The hell? Spirit Emerald. What the fuck is that? Oh, it's these things. I accidentally activated one of them yesterday. It said something about the save charms when you're doing summoning. Loot you guys. This loot custom thing is cool, but it definitely needs to be more comprehensive and more granular. Or if it is, and I just can't find it, rather than just like this menu here, then they need to, find a way to make it more accessible. Like, or more visible. Oh, it's 31 Celsius and the dog is dead behind my chair. Seems like she farted and then passed out. I got a pretty rude awakening this morning from her. She came flying in, jumped on me, and I was all of a sudden covered in, like, not mud, but like wet dirt. She jumped in the pool and came back out soaked. Or like her little, not a pool, I fucking wish. I'm too poor for that shit, but like we got like a little, one of those little clamshell pool things for like kids and dogs. He jumped in that. And then jumped on me while I was sleeping. Lucky me. Right, altar. Oh yeah, Ben said before he got 55 prayer potions from a, I think it was a Bloodveld, which is just fucking wild. Go like that. I'm curious how much a prayer potion is worth. Wait, I've got prayer potions. I can just check. Because Snapdragon's worth fuck all. Boom. How many got left? 10. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Cool. Cube. Oh my god. Wait, can you hear this? I'm going to talk a little bit so it comes through. Come on. Can you hear the yelp? She's dreaming. The puppy is dreaming and yelping. I wonder if she's going to wake herself up. I don't think she's done. Funny, she's not really a barking dog, so it's like she barks almost more in her sleep than when she's awake. The only time she ever barks is like when we're playing. Alright, Edgeville. You can't do that when you're in combat. I'll turn this back on. That'll help. I think I'll get the task first, then go to the bank. Just in case I need to get an item out or something. Alright. Another assignment. Grotworms. I have not done these yet. I mean, I know where they are because I did. I've said before, the only boss that I tried in this game on my main. So I tried playing it just a little bit and seeing what it was like to make some gold to buy a bond on this instead. So Queen Black Dragon is the only boss that I've actually tried on this, which was a good first impression. I actually quite liked it. But that's so I know where the grotworms are. I don't know if I've actually killed them though. I guess we're gonna find out. I think it's this cave. Yeah, I don't really remember much of the fight with KBD. I remember there being like a firewall thing. But what I do remember is I enjoyed the fight. I thought it was a cool fight. Sorry, QBD, not KBD. Investigate corpse. Bonk. I don't know what these wood spirit things are. I don't like these spirits. I've gotten a few spirits, but I don't know. These, I think they give you like, when wood cutting this consumes, it'll give you, yeah, it gives you just extra. Horrible. They're stackable. We'll pick them up. Why not? I think, yeah, these are young grotworms, so there are higher tier ones. Maybe we should have a look, see what level the higher tier ones are. Oh, why am I? Oh, yeah, I'm picking up the bones because I got prayer enabled. For the thing. With the custom loot, young grotworms. Are they all just young on this floor? Cave opening. A disgusting worm. That is rude. Oh, what do we got here? Level. I might regret this. Oh, they're ranged too. Alright, let's see how much damage it does to me. Oh, I'm not killing it very quickly. So I don't think this is going to be worth it. I'll kill one, maybe. Wait, why does this change back? And this bar keeps moving. It's really annoying. Fine, I'm actually just going to leave. Let's get some health back. Yeah, this bar keeps on moving. Even while locked. And I don't know why this has swapped back to the multi-combat one, the Royal Cape. Oh yeah, you get like Royal Hide or something here from memory. Wait, I don't have a cape. This is my first cape. I now have a cape. Too royal, my lord. We'll never be royals. Royals. Sorry. And the YouTube vid has been demonetized. I'm gonna lose all of my 0 cents. We'll never be royals. Royals. Alright, I'll stop. I'm sorry. I apologize on behalf of no one. We'll never be royals. Alright. Oh, I dropped me some food. Nom 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 nom. I haven't figured out, it doesn't seem like eating food has like 8 delay on this. I could be wrong, but it doesn't seem that way. More flax. Crafting XP, let's go. Oh, never me. Oh my god, I gotta stop. It's addictive. Catchy song. So that's been another interesting thing. It's like, I haven't been listening to music while doing this series. I've been just doing the game audio for the full immersion. And it's been weird because, like, I literally make music. I'm a music producer. And I'm not listening to music. It's so strange. I mean, I could set it up so it does both, music for stream and in-game music for the videos, but like, that means the in-game music and the regular music we playing for stream will also suck away a little bit of the immersion. And aside from the audio not being balanced well at times, the music in this game is really good. Alright, 12 more. Loot? Oh, yeah, this loot window is really, really kind of crap. Like, it takes way too long to update. Like, I feel like that's just a common theme with this game, though, is, like, when it comes to anything combat-related, including the looting, it just feels sluggish. I don't know if it's because, like, it's, like, tab-targeting MMO style, but, like, on a 600 millisecond game tick. I think it's a 600 millisecond. I don't like, that's what old school is, and it feels sluggish enough. But like, the difference is that old school is designed around that. Like, that's how they like build boss encounters. It's how they like they're very aware of like ticks and how the ticks work and what role they play in the game. But like, this doesn't feel. Like, the combat doesn't feel like it matches up. It's like, you can't help but, like, even if, like, you've never played old school, you still can't help but compare it to other, like, tab-targeting MMOs, like World of Warcraft. And for me, it's even worse because I played things like Arcade, which have, like, the tab-targeting MMOs, like, this type of stuff, but they're also, that one also has an extremely low global cooldown. So it's like, it feels like pretty much like 4 times faster than like WoW even. Cool. One more. I'm melting. I hate summer. We'll never be royal. I can't help it. Leave me alone. Nice warriors. I don't like this task at all, but it is what it is. I think I've only got like 1 or 2 Slayer tokens, so I don't really want to waste them. And Ben said it seems like they're fairly rare for him. Like he hasn't gotten many of them. Truck that there. What have we got? We've got Ice Warriors. I might actually want food for this. Just a little bit. What do these heal now? 333. Okay. Magic potion +5 magic. Oh my god. Temporarily increased defense. You know, fuck it. YOLO. Risk it for the biscuit. Okay. Oh, there's an altar on the way anyway. Last time I was here, these guys kept attacking me. Oh wait, they can still attack me. I'm 63. I'm 2 levels off. Leave me alone. Get away. Bullies. Boom. Boom. Oh, there was something that I tried the other day. I want to try it again. I'll do it on that one. I managed to corner trap him on this, but I'm not sure what the conditions of it were. Oh, medium clue. Let's go. I need him to go over. Oh, crap. I messed it up. He should be able to turn around this corner. Yes, now I come over here. We run over here. And go here. I didn't do it. I got some of them trapped on, like, they stood here. And I stood here. Oh well, doesn't matter. No big deal. What is southeast? Is that? I don't remember. Oh, Jesus! Oh, come on, let's leave him. Go over this one. Unless it was here. No. You know, I want to do this. I want to figure it out. What was it? No, not him. He's too far. Maybe it's you? No, too far. Has to be this guy. Oh, 96 we're getting. Let's go. I can't do it to this one. Oh, I can do it here. Okay, so this is the southwest. This one I expect when you're going like, when you're the northeast and it's the southwest. This guy? No. You. Let's try you. Okay, I'll come here. Okay, that worked. Yeah, okay, so... I don't understand why that worked on him, but not on him. Alright, kill this and we'll try this again. Yeah. Interesting. I wonder if it's just in this, it's just if I'm to the north and they're to the south. Like, this guy should get trapped on here if I'm lining up. Yeah. Because if I run around here, he should be able to follow me. Never mind, he's dead. He ain't following anybody anymore. So if I stand here, he'll come around this corner. I might have gone too far. Alright, let's get some health back. Next thing I have to test is if I can get this one to do it. Because I've only had success on this one so far. And that'll determine if it's like has something to do with the distance or not. Oh, whoops. Yeah, come on. Alright, so to do this, I want to stand like here. Maybe even here. Alright, now he comes. Move to here. Move to here. Yeah, he follows. Why is that? Okay, now he should... Alright. So what I want to do is go there. Yeah, he follows around. That's really weird. Maybe it is a distance thing. Maybe that's just coincidence that his, like, range of walking is here. We can test that, though. Let's go over here. If I stand one more time this way... Oh, okay, it's because it's out of his range. Okay, no, that makes sense. Okay, so there is no... Alright, so there is nothing like that. It's just... There is no corner trapping. It's just he was at his distance. Like, max distance. What about this one? So if I go here, he should be able to get me. If I go here, he should lose aggro. Yep. Okay, so it was just a coincidence. But if I'm here... He can't walk to this tile, but he can. But I am still in like his. I guess you'd call it like a scan range. Like I am still within one tile of his attack. There's like corner tiles in old school. If they're a monster that takes up a 2x2 space or more, like a large monster, they can actually hit you around corners and stuff. Sorry, they can hit you at the diagonal. So monsters are capable of seeing the tile that is the corner of them. So I guess when I'm here or here, that one and that one, can see me because I'm one tile away, but I'm not. They think they can attack me and that I'm in an attackable position, but I'm not for them because I'm out of their walkable range. Interesting. Unfortunately, that's very limited in its use case, though. But it is helpful here, at least. A little bit. Gonna heal up before fighting this one. Where's his range? Okay, so his range is here. Oh, I might be able to do this, then. Oh, bugger. No, his range is also here. Damn. Oh well. It is what it is, and I have to sneeze. That felt good. Nothing like a good sneeze. Okay, yeah, this one's ranges that tile there. So if I go here, he'll back off. Oh wait, no, if I go here. Do these have a tile range, like a range distance? Dun, 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 dun. Nah. Wait, an extra tick. Oh, damn, he still gets a hit. Oh, I also got this, which I'm liking this ability. I need to use it more. Alright, let's gain our health back. What do we got? 17 more. Okay. Easy. What we might do is we'll do player tasks at Vanica until it gives us a duplicate task. Like one that we've already done. And then we'll do that and then we'll try out the Canifus trainer, which I can do. But it might be a bit slower for actually getting the kills. Oh, this one. Bang! Get him! Big damage. Big boy damage. Oops. Damn, he can't hit me. Alright, if I time this. No, he still gets to hit me. I think I'm also casting my air spell more by the looks of it if I do that. Can't walk back to that last tile. Pew, 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 pew. Now try again. Holy, that truck did a chunk of damage. Oh, 50. Sweet, I can use Mystic Armor. That's another thing we want. We want to get 66 Mage, so we can go into the Mage's Guild and get Mystics. That'll be my next gear upgrade, I think. There are gear upgrades in between, but that one's just a guaranteed easy access one. Provided that store's still in there. It better fucking be in there. Health back. Ow. That was rude. But need them. Oh, we hit him, get the energy, and then we charge him. Nice, that's how we avoid as much damage as possible. I should bring binds as well, probably. That'll make it even easier. So that's stackable, and then I won't need food. Ow. Ow. What if I go boom and then choke? Does that just kill him with that? Yeah, okay, that's cool. I don't even get touched. Let's fucking go. Skeletal armor. Ooh, that's the offensive one. That's the power armor. Okay. You got my attention. Oh, that was another cool thing that we got to try for the first time, is using like the provoke skills and stuff like that as a group. Ow! If I stand here... I think I could do that and possibly avoid getting hit. Possibly. Right, one more. You, I think you're the one that we can bring to here. Yeah. Cool. Oh, we're definitely going to go to the next Slayer task up when we get to 20 kills. And get more points, even though it might still just be 1 point times the multiplier. $29, let's go, let's go. Get task. Hill Giants, very nice. That's some limpwort roots and some big bones. We just go to this one. Yeah, I mean, this has safe spots down here, so might as well. And we'll get the key. This is a fantastic task. Oh my god, I didn't even think of the Chaos Druids in here. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Is that 9? 8 or 9, so that's way more than, Wait, fuck you! What's this require? YOLO. I wanna know what it requires, I wanna know what's in it. Oh yeah, that'll be why Jack has a higher level than us. Because he's explored, like, one of these, I think. Oh my fucking god. Oh my god. It's so much nicer. Alright. I'm never going back there to a dungeon. I mean, Haverly dungeon. Alright, so we go... Where the fuck's the key again? Oh, that's it there, right? Key. Come here, key. There you are. Oh, it's the brass key. Yeah, because the dusty key is the Taverley dungeon one. Yoink. 26, cool. I'm twice their level. Now, is the safe spot still just here? Oh, wait, here. Looking good. Gonna come up Millhouse? Oh. I mean, these are also level 26. I could just tank them. Give me the loot. Give me the loot. Give me the loot. Oh, they're not even damaging me. Cool. In that case, let's just find the densest spot. So let's go look at this. Is there a summoning thing? Involves mining and smithing, construction, crafting, farming. Wait, there's no summoning one? Oh, that's kind of lame. Do I hold on to these or do I just use them? I don't really want to bank. I think I just use them for now. The small bones are going to get annoying. What are these worth? 249 versus 2. Can't even filter it. Let's go in there. Hopefully there's like none of these regular bones on the ground in there. Oh, this looks much better. I might be able to swap this back to 3 as well. Because I don't... If they're not doing damage, then I don't care if they're hitting me. Like if multiple hitting me. Or if they did little damage like that. God, I almost wish this task was extended. No limpets yet, though. Cool, retaliate's on. Fuck the chaos, I get tons of them anyway. Yeah, 59's the next, my last fire spell. 62. Cool, that's what I want next. I still don't know how much, like, what weakness, like, is it just an accuracy thing? Is it bonus damage? How much bonus damage? I haven't figured that out yet. I don't know if I have a method for testing it consistently. Alright, if we can, after this one. No, we can't. I was going to say after this one. I'll, Oh, wait, if I do this, that'll just pop him. Cool. I'm going to regen some health. Down there. How'd I hit 4 with that? Unless the bouncy one went to him and him. Him and him. And then the fire breath hit this one, I guess? No. You're not quick enough to complete totem pole position achievement. I don't know what the fuck that even is. Looks like we might have to do a banking trip. I'm not sure. Not dropping those. Might just drop the salvage and the arrows. Maybe the Marinta. I can surely just buy the arrows. I did not mean to loot all, but all good. Put these up here. They'll be the things that I want to drop. Oh my god, the limpwets are just rolling in. Loving it. Loot custom. Heal up a little. At this rate, we might have to bank anyway. What's my quickest bank chest? Lumbridge, probably. Maybe Felder Pills? Oh no, I did not mean to do that. Alright, we need to do this. Let's kill this guy quickly before we AoE things. No, too late. Shark here. Cool. We want to heal up. Custom. That's there. 19 more. Yeah, we're going to have to bank regardless. Alright, let's just go to either full or really low, then teleport out. I also need to check the Lumbridge bank chest if it does heal, because apparently it looks like if you're using bank chests, they can heal you. They're just not like a bank where the whole area heals you. Oh, I was like, why have I got 10 points left? I'd leveled up. Come on, one more limpwet. One more limpwet. Getting low on health. Come on, game. I can do it. Got it. Oh, I should have grabbed the big bones first. That's fine. That's fine. Lumbridge. Do I get healed at this chest? Alright, first question is, do I get healed just standing in front of it, or do I have to have it open? This chest doesn't seem to do it. Interesting. Very interesting. I wonder if the Feldip Hills one does. I wonder what the criteria is. Jack said that you do heal at the bank chest, and I'm pretty sure I tested it and I did heal at a bank chest. Yeah, I'm healing. Why does the Lumbridge one not count? Strange. Very strange. On our bike. There might even be a challenge for going through this. Actually, probably check out the battle staffs. Can I get them without any diary done? Just some. Where's the little shit? A barrel buy battle staffs? Okay, I can buy 8. Alright, we'll do that for now. I'll add that to my daily rotation thing. That, pineapples, the seaweed, because they're both there. I should probably do the buckets of sand. I don't actually know if I've got the buckets of sand unlocked. My daily runes from the rune stores. Which hopefully I'll unlock another soon. Does this give an achievement? I think it does. A diary task, right? Maybe not. Or maybe that's just old school. Or maybe I'm just making shit up in my head. Alright, let's go to that dungeon. These dungeons are fantastic. Little additions. Because they give an opportunity. Not only is it like obviously, you know, giving more things to kill, so there's not as much congestion. You know, obviously not that important in this game by the looks of it. Maybe it is later on, but like in old school third days, it gets rid of congestion, but it also gives an opportunity to redesign the inside dungeon without changing the upper levels thing, so you can keep the other part completely as it's always been. Both aesthetically and, you know, functionally too. Like if there's something like, well, in this case, the dusty key, right? You can keep things just perfectly fine as they are, or the safe spots. And then you can have a second area where you can be a little more lenient with it. Wait, is that a spawn? Wait. No. You are fucking kidding me. Oh, I hate everything about everything now. I have been doing the spirit weeds because I had so much trouble getting limpworts. So I stopped doing Taramins. Oh my god, this is so good for when I hit qualms though, because I've got so many qualms. And I've got so many qualm seeds. Actually, we'll do a farming run after this task too. Oh my god, this is huge. How many is it? 4? Because even if it's slow, you can just world hop, right? Oh my god, gimme. Gimme. Oh, this is so good. Oh, the Herblore XP, the Herblore XP. And these are also non-aggressive, so I could come here just for the limp words. All right, that one just respawned. I'm curious how long these ones take. Because I might have accidentally picked this one up a few times. I've only got 2 more kills, so I might as well go get it. Hey. Oh, it's respawned. Okay, okay. So I could probably do 3 worlds of hopping. Maybe 4 before they respawn, but that's perfect, because that means I can just stay in Aussie worlds. That's pretty fucking good. Like, we're gonna get this kill. I'm gonna do 1 inventory of world hops. So we take that. Take that. Take it. Alright, and then we go. I've got it set to W. Take that, take that. And they're spread out enough too that they don't actually bring up the loot menu if I don't want to. Alright, cool. Let me hop again. Oh, oops, no, I went back to the wrong world. I went back to the world I was just on. GG. End of the account. Horrible. Worst case scenario. Oh, well, these ones have respawned anyway. Planned. Planned. We're just going to say it was planned. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Oh, right as I get there. Gaming. Gaming. Alright, we're going to do a farm run. That is huge for the XP. Because I can also do master when I have the aura up, which I got some Viswax from the place above Runespan. Ben told me about that. Ugh, that place can oh wait, 1 second. I want to update my combat. Because of that. Yeah, magic. Alright. Let's keep this. So override. What's exact matching? Still wish you could just change the amounts of these. That's alright. Return to the bank. Yeah, Ben told me about the Viswax and the where it is. Like, I saw the Viswax was a thing, but I didn't know where to get it from. Let's chuck that there. Alright, now that we've got that, let's do our run. Or do we have... Let's actually swap. Oh, I don't want to swap them, I just want to move them. Yeah, like, look at my Taramin seeds. Look at those Taramin seeds. Do I go with these for a bit? Alright, so Qualms, I got tons of that. Now that I know this, alright. What level is Qualm? 50 something, 56, okay. 56. $54 for the cleaning, but for the actual potion, where's super strength? 55, okay. So is that 55 for both, or 56 and 55? $56 and 55, okay. That's very doable. Do I just go for the more XP with this, even though I've got all these and I can't even fucking use them? No, I think we swap. Alright, let's go like that. Save settings, now that we can do this consistently. Why Aventur? Oh yeah, Aventur. Oh yeah, there's my runners. Okay. Cool. Before we do that, we check this. None of them have XP. I don't know how that XP thing works. I do. Why is it 15 instead of 10? I mean, I want 12, but why is it listed like that? The range. Also, this place still has the best soundtrack so far. I mean, obviously Ports the Rim, but... Yeah, oh yeah, I've started doing my allotments to get fruit into these, but also for the XP. Because I don't know how to get tree seeds yet. That's the one thing that I'm still stuck on. I'm guessing it's the farming requests from the people over here. But, is what it is. I didn't even do my farming contracts in old school, so I like how I'm doing it here. Bobby 13. Bobby 13. No. Bring the music back. Why'd you stop the music? Oh, well, there. As we will do Canifus last. That way we can just go straight to the... Wait, did I not complete the task? Did I not complete the task? Wait, tell me that's it there, right? What happened? You can't do that. Congratulations, Unragged. Oh, no. Oh, I didn't even complete the time. I'm an idiot. Also, I haven't figured out this compost thing yet. I think, like, it seemed like Jack said, it seemed like, does he automatically do your compost or something? Or does he just do, like, everything at that moment, or... I am not sure. Oh, you're wet again. I'm now covered in dirt. Oh my god, you are so... Do not get on the bed. Don't... Oh, you little... God damn. She is... The dog is drenched. Puppy. My arm looks like I've been dealing with potting mix or some shit. No, as long as she's happy. It's pretty hot today, so if she's drenched, she's probably feeling a lot better than I am. Alright, so I'll go here then. Oh, hang on, I got a DM. Sorry, I'm just sorting something out a little bit. Alright, where were we? Oh, I think I was just talking about the dog. One of them, two of them. I'd love to be able to menu entry swap those for drop as well. Like, menu entry swapper is just such a huge game changer. Like, I feel like it needs to be in this as well, if it isn't already. There's just so much convenience. Even if like it's in a limited capacity, like maybe there's a reason they don't want to do it. Obviously, I haven't seen any of the dev live things where they talk about a lot of stuff. Maybe there's a reason they don't want to do it, which is fair enough. But even in a limited capacity, maybe. Albeit, I'm sure a limited capacity is probably potentially more difficult because you got to set specific items or categories of items or whatever. Let's do that. I think this is a really nice change as well. The fact that plants can't die. Reason being is you don't want to be like dailies and weeklies and stuff like that. Obviously, these are more frequent than that, but like in general, dailies and weeklies and stuff are pretty toxic in my opinion. They're like artificial engagement. They're like there specifically to force you to log in rather than because you want to play the game. And they can be done. There is ways to do it right, I reckon. I don't think it's a, always bad thing. But I think one way that it is a bad thing is if you are punished for it, which is kind of what happens when the plants go from disease to die. I don't think you should be punished for not logging in, I guess. And in a way, like, it's kind of, mitigated, right? Like, it's not completely eliminated. Like, your crops aren't growing if they're diseased. So you are still mildly punished, very lightly punished. But you're not, like, completely kicked in the balls from it. Let's go to... Let's just guarantee that... Oh. Yeah, you're not completely kicked in the balls by it. From dead crops. Which is kind of like, similar to me, it's like Kingdom Miscellanea, right? I think that should decay over time, and if you let it go too low, then you do start to get penalized. But you have a lot of leeway before that actually happens. No. Why is he saying no? It happened again. Did he get like a crazy... Did you... Oh my god, he got a pet, didn't he? Did you get a pet? This motherfucker gets spooned. This guy is the biggest spoon in all of RuneScape, just saying. Usually he gets spooned on things that he doesn't want. What type of pet? What did he... Fishing? I think that's what he got first. I think he got Temporos first last time. But yeah, he had like 3 pets within like the first week of Gim or something like that. It was ridiculous. Oh yeah, let me... Goes left. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, like he's also, like when we were doing Bandos, he got the full set, including the boots and the hilt. So all 4 pieces from Bandos by 40 KC. One of each piece by 40 KC. We had multiple hilts before we had a single fucking blade. But yeah, 40 KC. And the crazier thing was, it was all within one 32 kill task. So he had 8 KC, and then in which he didn't get it in there. And then we did one 32 kill task together, and yeah, he got all 4 items. Insane. Pet at 360k fishing. Oh, Jesus Christ. And you know, I can't even talk. Like, our whole Gim team is so spooned in so many regards. I didn't bring runes. Yeah, so he also got like, you know, 1 KC Voidwaker, I believe it was the gem. I got 13 KC T-Bow. Me and Jack's brother got like a 3 and 4 KC enhanced weapon seed. Like, there's just all sorts. It's always the fishing pets that Actually, funny enough, like we were playing on group hardcore on old school. We started as hardcores. One of the things that one of the ways that we lost a life was Jack fell asleep during Wintertod, which obviously meant we lost, I think that was our 3rd life that we lost. But more than that, what was funny was that, actually, can I just go, did I add the thing? I did add the Slender, cool. But more than that, he didn't realize until months later that he got the fucking Wintertod pet. He got the Phoenix without even knowing it. And he just died and lost the Phoenix, so he didn't ever see it anywhere. Oh my god, you're so drenched, Bubby. Hey, you're soaked. You having fun? Oh my god, my blanket is soaked now. Oh. You're a little cute. Here is a pretty girl. You're a pretty girl. Pretty Bubby. Alright, it is funny though, there's a lot of things that we got like giga spooned on, but then there's times where like just not getting the item they want. I think Jack, for example, he got giga spoon. I don't even know if he was spooned, but he got like 3 tormented synapses from tormented demons. All he wanted was the claws. Like he was trying to get claws for so long, but he just couldn't get them. Just kept getting synapses. Which is like super lucky, but also not what he was after. I think a similar thing happened with the Nox Halley and the Rancor. I think he was going for Rancor and kept getting Nox Halley pieces. I don't quite remember though. Alright, we just need to kill one. Die, please. And I need to kill one, but I am going to go into that dungeon afterwards and world hop those limpworts while I'm here. Alright, and then we'll go... Oh, cool. So that is task 19, meaning we're going to go to a higher tier Slayer Master to get hopefully get more points for the next task. Howdy, world hall. Let's see if it's 3 worlds that we can do. Limpwort. You have unlocked Squeak the Squid Pet. Oh, it's a different pet in this. Cool. That's cool. Squeak the Squid Pet. That sounds better than a herring, to be honest. Not heron, sorry, not a herring. Can you imagine a herring following around? Just like a fish flopping on the ground. God damn it. I guess we are trying out the stuff. We aren't doing the thingy. Seeing how many worlds it takes. I wonder why that limit even exists. Or like, what's the cause of the login server not letting you just hop? Yeah, hop worlds. Hello. Am I already on that world? Oh. Alright, let's go to Canifus. Get tasks. What do we get? What do we get? What do we get? What do we get? I need another assignment. Rocks. Ugh. Yeah. It's not fun. rock slugs. Oh, I need rock salt, don't I? Please tell me I don't have to manually do it. Please tell me that's a quality of life thing they've done. Rewards, let me check that it's not in there. Please, please, please. Please. Persuade, no. Oh, no. Wait, killing blows quicker. I don't mind if it takes a little bit. I just don't want it to be, I just want it to be automatically done. Fuck. Alright. I guess we're just gonna have to find out the hard way. Salt shaker, that's what we want to get. Bag of salt, salt shaker. What the fuck's this? Always have access to salt when on the move by adding this to your tool belt. Oh, okay. What, do I do that and then have 10 each? Can I do that and then add to tool belt? Right, nothing interesting happens. Don't tell me this just does it. Alright, we're taking that anyway, just in case. Alright, let's go to Fremnik. Sorry, 1 sec, I'm just sorting something out. All of these are pretty cool. Oh no, I have to actually, I do have to manually salt. Oh. Oh shit. Oh, this is, oh, I hate this. Hang on, I'm swapping this back to 4 for a sec. I've got to message someone. Oh my god, we have to do this for so many of them too. And it's moved again! Why? Why does this move? Oh, I have it unlocked. Why does this one... It's just this one. So weird. I wonder if it happened when I logged in or not. This task really sucks. I have to pay attention. Now let's get some health back. This is green, so let's... What is it? 2.4k. Okay. Iron stone spirit. Is this just the iron ore when mining? Yeah, okay. Interesting. Killed like what, 5 or 6, and I already hate this. Weak to water. Should we try the water? See if this does actually a lot more damage. Oh my god, it doesn't matter because I start to salt it at the end. Nah! This task sucks. I'm probably going to complain the entire time, just a bit of forewarning. Hopefully they do drop the iron boots though. That's the only caveat. Oh yeah, wait, isn't that how this cave, isn't this what this cave does? Isn't it, actually sounds familiar. Bronze, iron, steel, or no, black, steel, mithril basilisk, Duroth adamant, cuirass. That makes sense. That makes sense. Oh wait, Jolly's adamant, and then cuirass rune boots, maybe. That makes sense to me. That sounds familiar too. Oh, unless I'm just thinking, no, unless it's the mystic pieces. Like you get all the light mystic pieces here, right? Maybe it's like boots, gloves, or gloves, boots. No, that can't be it, because like the robe top, the robe bottoms are off the infernal mages, I think, and then robe tops are something further. I don't remember. I think the jellies, maybe. I don't know. I never liked the yellow mystic much, or the white mystic, or whatever you want to call it. Oh, it's even worse to have to right-click every single time. Grab these, I guess. I don't know what they're for, but we've got the inventory space. No, I suppose I should take this opportunity. Oh yeah. First task. I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of itching to get back to dungeoneering. That shit's fun. It's fun as a group, at least. Are you feeding your farm on flowers? I still don't know. Yeah, he told me that apparently you can buy flowers and chuck that in. Could always do 1 pen with the strawberries and flowers. I wonder where I even bought them from. $32 rock. Oh, crap. What was it? It was 32? Hopefully wilderness zones things stay aggressive for the whatchamacallit, the Chaos Druids. But what was the other thing that was 32 that I actually wanted to be higher than so they wouldn't attack me? I've forgotten. It was in Edgel, I think. Oh, I don't remember. Brain no worky. I think I need 55 defense for Infinity Row? In this at least, even though it's only 30 or 25 defense in the other one. I don't remember. Thing is, I couldn't see the Mystic Robe's stats when I went there and I had to look at the info and stuff. I don't even know if they're worth it. I mean, they're obviously not worth it. That should take so much time to get. But I'm thinking it's just... I was elking fishing bait because I can get the elk so easily from pickpocketing. So I figured I might as well do the elking at Mage Arena and just get the Mage Training Arena and get the extra, whatchamacallits, the pizzazz points. I feel like you gotta say pizzazz points while doing jazz hands or something. 18 more of these things. This better be worth more than... Like, this better be worth 20 points instead of 10. Please, I beg. I beg Arena. Oops, no, crap. I meant to swap those, that's what I wanted to do. So many. I gotta figure out where to do the grapevines. I feel like that's like, it's decent XP maybe. Or even for like cooking. I don't know. Because they were on, like, you do that stuff on Kurend in old school, so I have no idea why you would do that stuff here. Or if it's even good. What the hell? How did I chop both redwood spots in this? Unless some other dick was just here. Trying to troll me. Fine. Well, my response. Screw you, game. Oh. Okay, so it was the Mystic. Okay. I mean, right now, that's an upgrade. Tier 50. Okay, we'll take it, we'll take it. That is an upgrade. What was it? 22 armor versus... versus 42, so it's nearly twice as much. God damn. It's actually a pretty decent upgrade. No. What was it saying? Yeah, it's definitely not like worth chasing after the pieces, especially considering at 66 I can just buy them, hopefully. Provided the Wizard's Guild is still the same. I wonder if they even have Hand in the Sand in this game. Hand in the Sand was for the rune shop. That was like an anti-botting thing, I think. One of those anti-botting things is just inconvenient as shit for the regular players. I don't see it. And I don't think it was a serious thing. Maybe I'll get a new rune shop as well, hopefully. 6 more, let's go. God, that's pretty good. I need to use those abilities more often. Shark him! What's this and what's this? Deep impact, blast the target with... Oh, maybe I should swap that into there as well. Like, if we go... Swap that, swap that. And then that can go there, because it's a little different by the looks of it. There we go. Shark! And then boom! And then boom! Alright, cool. Really 20. God damn, we got 10 points. I could have just gone to Vanica for that. Oh, at least we got Mystic Gloves, I guess. That's something. That's something. Alright, back to Vanica. Actually, no. I'm gonna... Just because I'm gonna forget, I'm gonna dump everything and update my... Whatchamacallit? What are they called? Presets. Dump that, dump that. Same. Because we got the gloves on. Oh, I've got the helmet on, so I should probably swap that helmet. Let me just get the task first, see what it is. I need another assignment. Rotworms, easy. They were chill. Tank counter. Helmet. Swap that. Put that back. Save. And let's go. What's the room? Yeah, this also grays out for whatever reason. Don't know why. I can't remember if that happens when I log out. I'm noticing a lot more bugs in this game than in old school. Which isn't not particularly good. Walker. I can do that too. Yeah, you think you're cool? I'm cool. Also, I don't know what this is too. Oh, where is my character going? You got the raiders. I think they're like I'm guessing they're like an event because they're not always there. Oh, investigate corpse. Hello. As a dead knight as... Okay. Hello. Whatever. I guess we can... Go back to air blast then. It only costs 1 rune. Or 1 type of rune, I mean. We'll pick it up and just get the bones anyway. What happens if I just do this? Boom! Oh, 1 hit. Fuck yes. Strength potion. Let's take that. Yes. Oh yeah, I said I was gonna bring nature runes, because then I can bind melee creatures and I can high elk every now and then if I need to. chemicals down there. That loot hole just closed it for whatever reason. Drop that. Oh, the vase may count as herb loss supplies, unfortunately. Another royal pack. Pack potion. I don't really need either of those. I'm making them anyway. Actually, yeah, I'm just gonna drop it. So I'm gonna have tons of them. I mean, I've already got plenty. What am I talking about? Alright, do that. Right there, come on. Oh, God. Like, can I make it automatically pick up coins as well? Because, like, why not? Extraction, rare items. That's weird. Why would you not let it just pick up coins? When it's an item stack that you always have. Range. I'm not used to like mind runes and stuff being like only used for like the cursing spells kind of thing, like confuse, enfeeble, weaken, curse, all that type of stuff. Maybe they have more of a role in necromancy, I guess. I don't know. I know there's runes that get made there. I don't know if these are part of the prerequisites is other runes or not. Maybe it is. I think I like the idea of these bottled spirits, actually. But I haven't really used them, so what do I know? Actually, come to think of it, it's kind of like how old school is starting to implement stuff like that when you think about it, because like they've introduced like the diabolic worms or whatever, and the ones that let you get extra anglerfish. Hey, Bubby. You're not drenched at the moment. And I think a lot of people receive those very positively. So I feel like there's definitely a lot of overlap in these games that could be added to both their benefits without losing like their core identities as well. Oh no. Oh no. The dog has got the Coke bottle. Oh good, she left alone. I was playing with a Coke bottle because it's too big for her mouth to adjust, so she like tries to put her mouth over it, but it doesn't quite work, so that pushes it along, and then she chases it and pushes it along by accident. Awesome. I really want to do Desert Treasure, but the requirements are a bit high. I might start doing that next week. That might be the goal for the end of the week. Is Desert Treasure, because we've got to do Dig Site and Troll Stronghold. I've got to get 50 fire making, and yeah, just be able to do a little bit of combat. So maybe I'll work on like the combat and the fire making over the weekend or something. On the weekend I am going to stream, but I'll be streaming just regular chatting, maybe some like stream game or something. Kukuro. The more usual stuff I'll do with my stream. We can actually chat and converse. How many we got? 5 left, 5 left. Where'd the music go? I'll probably do like a 5 to 10 minute update videos on the weekend again as well. So that'll just be just on YouTube. Which are similar to what I've got coming out this weekend as well. They were the first update videos. Because there was no like VOD for that day. Ah, cool. Harpy bug swarm. Whoa, whoa. Alright, let's go to Edgefill. Go to the bank and add nature runes into the rotation. I'm sweating so much, it's so hot today. Nature runes. I'm gonna have to make more air runes at some point. This isn't gonna be sustainable. Ghosts. Okay. Best spot for ghosts. I mean, let's actually see what this says for the parade. What can I help you with? Got any tips for me? Heavily dungeon, they reckon. Oh, that's so shit. If you're after a bigot, you can find some stronger ghosts in the Stronghold of Security. I don't actually remember the ones in the Stronghold of Security. But the ones that are in Heavily Dungeon are kind of annoying because they're like pretty spread out and there's not that many of them. So we'll check out Stronghold of Security. I did not set this, did I? Lame. Lame. Oh, I wonder if I can just spam click through the doors in this one or not. Whoa, this looks actually extremely similar to old school still. What the fuck? Like, this looks basically like old school. This is the most old school looking thing that I've seen so far. I don't know what floor they're on. Oh, oops, where am I going? Oh, that's the chain back up. God, it's been a minute since I've been here.
Hello.
Yo. How we doing?
Not too bad.
That's good, that's good. I'm currently in the strong order security going down to see what the ghosts are here.
I think like level 71.
Oh.
But if I remember correctly, Stronghold of Security mobs, at least in old school, gave 5% of the XP.
I think that's only specific ones. Yes, I know it may be dangerous, but I want to go down anyway. I don't have to answer any questions in this place. It's great. I mean, you're doing in old school, I guess, either, but I don't have to spam click either.
You don't have to spank, but if you've got a bank pin.
No, in the old one, it still asks you questions.
No. Only the first thing, and then you're through, as long as you've got a bank pin.
I still have to ask it, Jack, when I go down there.
I don't.
I think it'll probably be something to do with the Jagex launcher more than the pin.
This was before the Jagex launcher.
I'm not sure then, but I still get asked it every time.
I get asked at the door. It asks you something, and then every other door you just click and go through.
Mine just makes me ask every door. Well, not every door, I think it's the second door because it's the inner ones. Are the ghosts on the 4th floor or 3rd floor?
I think they're the 4th floor.
Everything in here seems lower level than expected. Like the scorpions and stuff are only level 26, 29 giant spiders.
Yeah.
The table pond thingies are 43. I think that's right. This place doesn't look that different from old school. Like as in like visually. It's weird.
Yeah.
Congratulations, you've been deemed worthy. You have unlocked another thing. Blah, 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 blah. What are you doing, Bobby? Yes, I know it's dangerous. Alright, there's the shades.
Really?
Alright, the ghost level 46 here.
Oh.
Yeah, I think things are actually a lower level in this.
I know they didn't attack me at all when I went down there.
What level are the anchors? Because those are like, I think they're level 81 in old school. And they're 54 here. Oh yeah, maybe they changed it too with the aggression because, you know, the first 2 floors are normally aggressive to you, aren't aggressive to you, and then the 3rd and 4th are. That seems different here too.
I walked through it like level, what is it, like 15? Maybe it wasn't completely low, but I also didn't have very much health or anything.
Right. Okay, yeah, this still isn't going to be worth the effort. Might just go to Tavily after I get my boot.
I'm trying to remember where else I saw ghosts. Oh.
I think they're in Barrock Sewers a little bit. They're definitely in the Wildy.
I think there's definitely some in Mauritania, which might be what I'm thinking of.
I mean, I do have Mauritania now. I'm trying to...
The tormented spirits are 40-something, just above the Ectophoctus. And I'm pretty sure they count as ghosts.
Yeah. That's also a little higher level than I want. You have a choice. I'll take the colorful ones. Alrighty. Cool. Teleport to Tavily. Definitely, I think they're only level 19, but they're just so spread apart.
What about Varric Sewers?
I said that. I think there's only...
Sewers, even.
Oh, Edgeville. I don't think there's many of them. I think they're like intertwined with like skeletons.
Is the Isle of Souls still exists, right?
I have no idea. No, I think it's just Soul Wars has its own island. But it's not the Isle of Souls. Yeah, I'm not seeing it in the drop down either. Oh, almost forgot again. I'll be back in a sec. I need a drink.
Hello, Ben.
Hey.
How's it going?
I just waited an hour and a half for them to say, "Are you okay?" And I said yes, and they're like, "Okay, cool."
And that's all they did.
That's all they did.
in a bag.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Alright. Look at what we got. Three of them there. Alright, this might not be too bad.
What you doing?
Killing ghosts for the Slayer task.
I never actually got ghosts.
Yeah, it might be because I'm doing Vanica.
Maybe. Saying to Jack while you were away, that was like the biggest
Oh, I
waste
could
of
hear.
2 hours of my life.
If only you had RuneScape on mobile.
I was tempted, I'm not gonna lie. I was sitting there and I was like, you know what, I could really just download a game right now and play.
And I still maintain it is better. Like the UI is better. Speaking of which, my UI just moved again, and it was a different bar this time. God damn it.
It's no resizing stuff.
No. It's literally just one action bar. Like, usually it's my one of the middle bars. Just keeps moving to the side slightly, I think whenever I world hop, or I don't know. And this time it was the top one moved slightly. But the others are just, yeah, I know. It's just, the other two they seem to be fine. They don't seem to move at all.
They're to fuck with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got 58 magic. I wonder if I could boost into the magic guild.
The guild.
I think you can. And I have magic potions which are +5. So if I get 60, I'm pretty sure you can, or at least you used to be able to.
Couldn't you boost into Mining Guild and stuff?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm just going off OSRS, but I'm pretty sure you could boost into guilds
Yeah.
on that. So
Like, I'm basing
drastic changes for this.
Because that means I could get to 61 and then buy Mystic if that shop is still in there.
I need to kill Dwagons to get Wagon Hide.
You'll also get dragon birds.
Yeah, but they don't get sent to my thingy. I'd have to go spend some time
Oh,
with cows
blue.
and crafting.
The blue dragon's only level 74 in this. What are the babies?
I mean, you could also do
The babies are 44. I think they're 48 in old school.
dragons.
Green dragons are in the wildy, but that doesn't seem to matter.
Yeah, you can buy green dragon hide
Yeah.
from the archery shop. That's why I was
Oh,
concerned
true.
about the blue and the black. I think I need 50 crafting for blue.
You receive... Oh, what the... Ghost Hunter goggles. What the fuck are these? Whoa, these are a set. They're a hybrid set. On damaging attacks, +3% damage against ghostly targets upon killing, +3% XP. And it scales up to 10% for both. Interesting. Still don't understand the benefits of hybrid armor. or even the distinction between tank armor. Oh, that was the last of my task. Cool. Back to Israel. Skeleton. Okay, that's fine. Skelly boys.
Wait, you know what you can do for ghosts, Jesse?
I'm glad you're telling me this after I've finished my task.
I just realized, Jesse. I just remembered the ghostly trolls in thingy.
Would you like to tell me where some skeletons are?
You don't want to know where I know skeletons are.
In the wilderness?
I'm big side quest.
Oh. I actually have to do that quest. That's going to be next week. I'm going to try and get Desert Treasure done.
Yeah, Dig Site has a really nice cave full of skeletons.
I mean, I'm just killing these ones here anyway. It's not a big deal. Yeah, that Limpwort spot is going to be so nice. I also realized why you're a higher level too. You get experience when you go through the things. The dungeon area experience. And you've gone through a few, I think.
What things?
The dungeoneering dungeons.
I haven't gone through any of those.
Oh, I thought you had.
Nope.
Maybe you just asked about them. Maybe it's just because you're lower level than us then, and you're getting less level mod penalties.
I think I also got a little bit of Dungeoneering XP off the Gothics butterflies.
Aren't they like 6 XP to start with?
That's at level 1. They scale with your level.
And it was still your lowest skill.
Yeah.
God damn. No, these aren't respawning quick
My
enough.
lowest skill, I think I had it like 10 before we started because of the butterflies.
Right.
I got somewhat lucky in this. Path of Exile character. Second boss in Act 2 got me a gold ribbon.
Nice, nice.
I think it was minimum rolls, but it was a roll, so.
Yeah, I think I'm
Also,
CBA on.
the thing is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, I think I CBA with PoE until the PoE 2 update with the end game.
Which we hope is good.
Yeah. I mean, they spent 2 leagues on it. You'd hope it was good.
Well, the Druid was a good addition.
And they
As
spent
much as
2
the
leagues
patch
on that because
sucked.
they pushed that back.
Yeah. As much as the patch sucked in terms of extra stuff, the skills and abilities and stuff that they did for the Druid, plus obviously the support gem changes, it did feel better.
That's good.
just have to remember to look at the changes that they do when that new patch comes out and see if my plant build gets screwed over or not. Because I want to do group content and crash Jack's PC.
The dream.
Jack, like, you can't see nothing with that build that I run. The entire floor gets covered and there's rain particles. Permanently.
And they also do like a bunch of optimizations though as well though.
Yeah, it felt
For my sake, not for fucking Jack's sake.
Jake.
Jake, yeah, I was saying steak and Jack at the same time.
It definitely did feel better. Like, even I wasn't getting to those points where the game was like frame laggy because there was too much shit on the screen.
That's good. Did you even try it out, Jack?
No, not that league.
Yeah. I wonder if it, because like, I just feel like mine should not be lagging that much. Like, yours is kind of bottlenecked. Right. Hardware. Mine's not the newest hardware in the world, but it's shouldn't be as laggy as it is.
I think everyone gets to that point though.
Yeah.
I think I'm in the same boat as you, whereas like I don't have up-to-date stuff, but it shouldn't be that big of an issue.
Yeah, as big as it is.
The fuck, getting new PC parts right now? No way. If I could sell a kidney to get them.
I mean, the issue's CPU bound, which shouldn't be that bad. That should be like one of the few pieces that isn't too bad on price.
Yeah. So what is it at the moment? GPU and RAM?
Yeah, well, GPU is because of the VRAM on it.
Yeah. Hell yeah, I'm gonna feel so much better when we do dungeoneering because I'm 15 levels higher than what I was.
Nice. You're actually going to contribute. Are you trolling me? Your game session now ended.
Just pan up at my third screen and see it. And now you have to wait 5 minutes.
Bruh.
Get fucked.
I think that's the nerd log.
No,
But why should I
I've
have to
been
close the client?
I haven't had a nerd log yet, and I've been on like 10-hour binges so far.
And
that
it's not
Discord call
responding.
last
Love
night?
it.
That Discord call last night, Jack, by the time I got out of it was 16 hours long, and I'm pretty sure I had RuneScape open the entire time.
Huh.
I get the dings as if to say, hey, you've been on for a while, think about going outside, but I've never been logged out.
Did you see what happened to me while you were away, Ben?
I did. Fuck you.
It's
In the most
really
polite way
ridiculous.
possible. Yeah, I know.
Always the fishing ones.
I was explaining on the video in the stream your luck and the group's luck in general. After you announced that.
I don't even know what we're aiming for in terms of like with OSRS. We do like what gear we wanted and like what dropped it and so on and so forth, and we have no fucking idea what to do on this one.
I mean, the dungeoneering's been fun so far, so that's...
Yeah.
I think like
Like, for
getting
us-
to bosses will be interesting.
Yeah, for us, like, you know, Slayer, for example, you go, oh shit, yeah, I unlock jellies and blood veils and all this stuff that have elite versions, and it's just like, stuff that I think would have elite versions don't, and the stuff that I think doesn't, does.
Like cows.
Like,
Super cow!
Yeah. But like, I'm fighting these blood veils, and I haven't had one yet.
Mm.
I've only had the infernal mages once, And the elite version of those hit like a goddamn fucking truck.
Yeah, it's almost like whatever old school has for the elite version, like for the superior versions, this one doesn't, and whatever the ones that old school doesn't, this one does or some shit.
And even then, we don't even know what drops from them.
Other than a chunk of cash, apparently, but from the... what we got from the cows.
Well, my hobgoblin one, because hobgoblins have elites.
Excuse me, what's a hobgoblin? Do you mean a hobby gobby?
Yeah, hobby gobby.
Thank you.
He's a bigger version of a smaller hobby gobby.
Yeah. The hobby gobby gobby. Great.
What's my next unlock? Ooh, rod arrows. And Tauroths.
I'm hungry, but I don't think there's a... I'm out of burritos, so I had the last one yesterday.
I had one for breakfast this morning.
Wait. Oh, nice. Yeah, I gotta order more food tonight.
I got up and I had no idea what I wanted to eat. And I was like, you know what? This sounds perfectly fine. It's the only thing I've had all day.
Only thing I've had is frosty fruits. I'll make some frosty fruits.
Also very low in calories.
I mean, it's high sugar.
Yeah, but in terms of calorie-wise, it's not bad.
I mean, it's also not filling in the slightest. It's basically just water with some sugar.
I mean, most ice balls are like that. Like the cyclones and stuff, the twisters that I have here, they're low in calorie, but they're, as you said, pretty much just pure sugar.
While mining, you found the remote totem middle.
The what?
Is it a totem piece? Yeah.
Yeah.
I have, like, boatloads of pieces, but none that can... Like, none that is actually for the one specific totem. It annoys me.
Actually, I'm gonna grab a frosty fruit up too.
I've got some from agility. I've got some from mining. I'm pretty sure I got one from archaeology. If you talk to some people on the dinosaur island, you can get a bag for them.
Huh. Is that the remote, the totem piece, or is that the strange rock you're talking about?
No, the strange rock you get the bag from some, like the museum, don't you?
Museum, yeah.
Yeah, the totem pieces, if you go to the island, there should be 2 people in that main, like, where you spawn in when you use the teleport. Unless you, like, because for me, I got it after I got another piece. I walked past them and they're like, hey, you've got something in your inventory. So unless you have to have pieces in your, like, a specific amount of pieces. But yeah, they gave me a bag. So it kind of freed up some space. Also, I still need to do my smithing as well, and I really don't want to do it.
I'm trying to unlock the thingamajig. Shifting sands.
Oh, the level 50.
Yep.
Oh, you'd have the construction level, wouldn't you?
Yep.
Are they thieving, mining?
Construction agility.
Okay, so it's only construction that I'm missing.
And then you can have...
yeah, prayer... There's 4 others as well, yeah.
Yeah, prayer, fire making,
But yeah, I got some cake instead.
Cake. What kind of cake?
Chocolate cake.
Nice.
I think they're like the Sara Lee ones you get in the freezer section. I think I'm actually going to have to do some actual air rune crafting.
You not just buy them from the shops.
I'm buying them out every single morning. Every time when I hop on, that's the first thing I do is my farm run, and during the farm run, I buy all the runes out.
Void
You know of any
Outpost as well.
No, I need to add that in. That's a good idea.
That one has the most runes of any.
Oh, really?
Thousands of Ellies and.
Oh,
body.
really?
Yeah.
Oh shit, I gotta go there. I might go there after this task. Because I've only been going to Varrock and Ports the Rim, and obviously I'll go to the Mages Guild once I've got it unlocked.
Are you using your rune crafting hood?
What rune crafting hood?
Wicked Hood.
What wicked hood?
Get it from Berthel.
What does it do?
You can feed it talismans, and it's like a you get free TP to the things. You get free rune essence.
Rune essence, not pure essence. So it's only Ellie runes you can do with it.
That's fine.
But it's 100 of them per day. Also, if you want,
I got tons of essence. I don't need that. I got like over 10k essence at least.
Same.
How?
The wizard.
Wizards.
The answer is always pickpocketing, Jack. Greatest skill in the game, thieving.
I also have 10k essence. Questing.
Disgusting.
Yeah, that was, I think, the Rune Mystery replacement, and the one after that gives you access to a chest that gives you Rune Essence every time you level up Rune crafting.
Oh my god, I think I want more cake. That was so good.
You fat fuck.
I know.
I can say that. Being a thick origin myself.
You still have got me beat for now. You're catching me though. You're catching me. That being said, I'm also losing weight, so you gotta catch up even quicker.
Tree. I think my favorite update, or what's it called? What's it called? Not update.
Quality of life?
Mechanic
Oh.
in Path of Exile was the tree.
Oh, most people hated it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that sounds like something Jack would like.
It was
If
just
it's normally
so...
frowned upon.
It was so underwhelming, and like the actual, well, I mean, not necessarily the tree as much, just the mechanic itself was extremely underwhelming. Like The fortresses gave fuck all.
Yeah.
I'll give Bloodfields one thing. They are a very good source of green chumps.
Hmm. Where they're gonna... above 30, I think. Maybe I'll take the dog for a walk a bit later.
It is quite warm outside.
Yeah, it starts falling off. Okay. Now I'm gonna get from. Smokes. Oh my god, Frosty Fruits is so refreshing. Maybe I'll stop screaming after this task. Not really doing much anyway.
Actually, do you know about where you get Reaper tasks, Jesse?
Yeah, what?
Reaper tasks, the boss slayer.
No idea. I don't even know about that.
Next to the Draenor warp gate.
Mm-hmm. To the underworld.
There's one on the left and one on the right. One portal leads you to Death's Domain. I think that's where you get the Reaper tasks.
Okay.
And the other one, I don't think you can go into. And there are apparently skilling bosses, which I got, and I don't know where Centerstone is, or how to get to it.
Oh, I saw that on the map somewhere. Because I remember seeing it and I was like, oh, that's interesting. They actually added Centerstone. Unless it's a...
On the world thing.
Oh, yeah, it is too. Okay, yeah, I have no idea then.
Ben managed to find the flies and bug beetle bits yesterday. Was incredibly clutch. I could
You're
not...
lucky I was. You're lucky I was in fucking Berthorpe doing what Jesse was doing with the cows. I've now realized how valuable that area is because everything is just in this such close proximity to each other.
You know where Siniston probably is? Yeah, I'm thinking about it. I'm pretty sure Siniston is the city that, like, lore-wise, that you dig up during the dig site. It's probably got to do with that obelisk thing in the middle where the guy disappeared to. The monolith.
Monorail.
That would be my guess. Let me also test something. Yeah, also when you click the map link to the RuneScape surface, it takes you to like that kind of area. Let me try that with a different dungeon. Yeah. The map link takes you to like King's Road kind of area. Oh, here it is. Dungeon link to Sentiston. It's the dungeon just under King's Road, so like northwest of Barrock Digside.
I missed the entire start of that. So what's the importance of Siniston?
I think Jack said he had a skilling boss there or something.
Yeah. For a Slayer Reaper task thing.
Hey, you're doing grot worms. Let's go.
I just finished the task.
Rotworms.
Alright. I am going to get my next task and then end the stream.
You're gonna get bats. I don't fucking know.
Try grab the Reaper task as well before you end.
No.
See if you can get giant mole.
You get that in addition to a regular task?
Mm-hmm. They're two different systems. So you can
Do they have
Oh, I got ghosts again.
levels though? Or can you get fucked over and get something that you will not be able to do? Because we're not really that high in combat level.
I am unsure. I'm pretty sure
Which one do I... Death's Hourglass?
Yeah, I think that's the one.
Get task. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Grim Gem. Are you happy to take on creatures as a group, or do you prefer to kill alone? Yes, I'm happy to receive group bosses. Are you happy to take on non-combat skilling creatures? Yeah, sure. Jack,
Yeah.
I require you to collect 6 souls from the following battle. Giant Mole.
Woo.
That's going to be interesting.
Yeah,
Anyway, I'm going to end the stream, but I'll be
Bye-bye,
back
stream.
tomorrow, and
Nice stream.
I'll actually have chat up tomorrow.
Goodbye, good friends, goodbye. Because now it's time to go.